Lots of onions will be harmed in the making of this video. Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. The whole purpose of today's video is to try and get me to cry. I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in 2021 that made me cry, and I'm going to be spoiling what part of the book made me cry. So if you don't want to know spoilers for the specific book, I'll have them chapter tagged, chapter marked, whatever you want to call it. The whole point of this video is to try and make me cry, and I feel like talking about how these books made me cry is not good enough. So we are going to be chopping onions while I do so. I will eat all of these. They are not going to waste. So don't bother commenting about food waste in America because I am not the issue here. Second up, I own a lot of these books, but I don't want onion juice anywhere near my books. I am a pretty sloppy reader, and I genuinely don't care about how beat up my books are, but I do not want my books smelling like onions. So I will be having pictures to the side over here that I will be glancing at to remind me what book I am talking about. I put them in the order of books that made me cry the least to the most. I did this a few days ago. I'm gonna have some surprises once I get into it. Finally, I want you guys to be able to tell whether or not I actually cry. So, for the first time in a long time, Amanda is going to be putting mascara on. So I know there are a few tricks that are supposed to help you not cry while chopping up an onion. I've never really been someone who cries while chopping an onion. I love the smell of onions and it doesn't seem to bother my eyes. Did do some research. I'm not allowed to chew gum, which is fine. I haven't chewed gum since high school. I bought yellow onions instead of sweet onions, but I am gonna be chopping up this bad boy first. Colombian basin onion. Don't know if that's good or bad. First, we're gonna chop up these little slicey chunks that I have left over from lunch. Google also says that I should wear protection. I'm not going to be doing that. I will most likely accidentally touch my face while I'm filming this video. And it also says I should make my onions really cold. It's cold out today. I can't control the weather, but it's as warm as I can tolerate it in here right now. And then finally, Google said I should cover my knife with lemon juice. I'm actually allergic to lemons, so I will definitely not be doing that. And I will also definitely not be slinging that giant knife around. What book made me cry the least, but still made me cry this year? My Dark Vanessa, which is a classic tearjerker, my dudes. This is the story of a young girl who was groomed by an adult man, her teacher. So they enter into a relationship when she is like 14 or 15 years old. It's the story of her as an adult looking back on that relationship and realizing some things. And it's also the story of her like retelling from when she was a child. I need a trash can. She first got into the relationship with this man. The story of My Dark Vanessa is, of course, a difficult one for lots of people to read. That was loud. I don't think I actually had a tear escape my eyeballs when reading this book, but I teared up a lot, and it was definitely something that I thought about a lot afterwards. It's gonna be interesting though, because the scene that made me tear up is going to be the scene that I don't think many people would have predicted me choosing to cry in, and it's probably because I didn't choose to cry in this book, it just kind of happened. There's this scene where Vanessa is kind of talking about when she's a child, this friend that she used to have, and how this friend one day started dating this boy, moved on, basically decided that she no longer wanted to be friends with Vanessa because she no longer had time for Vanessa, and had basically unintentionally decided that the boyfriend was more important than her friendship. There's a scene in the bathroom where they confront each other, and Vanessa basically says to her friend that maybe her friend wasn't the one saying the awful things to Vanessa, being like, hey, I no longer trust you, but she would repeat things that the boyfriend would say. The girlfriend would repeat things that the boyfriend said about Vanessa to Vanessa, as if being like, hey, I don't necessarily not agree with this. It's just that my boyfriend pointed it out and I couldn't help but notice. And Vanessa started to take an insult to this because she's like, if you didn't believe what he was saying, you would cut him down and you would stop him from repeating these things and saying these things about me. But instead, you're allowing him to say awful things about me and you're not caring, which to me is the same as you agreeing with him. This is something I went through with my best friend in college, and that's why the scene was very emotional for me. A friend of mine who had been single the entire time I had known her started dating someone, and started telling me what her boyfriend thought about me. Issues that she had never brought up with me before were suddenly an issue between us. And so when I had to watch Vanessa go through this, and then I got to watch that kind of be the catalyst of Vanessa feeling completely alone, which led to her falling into the arms of a much older man, it left me very emotional. I'm not here to say that Vanessa's friend is the reason why Vanessa started sleeping with an older man and started dating her teacher or anything like that. That man had to prey on her and take advantage of her, and he is the one to blame, because even if Vanessa went after him, he is the adult in the situation and should know to say no to her. Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I never thought this book was going to make me cry. I've never cried in a Sarah J. Maas book before, and I have read all of her books except for the novella in ACOTAR, and none of them have even close to make me cry in any scene whatsoever. There's a very specific scene right at the end that I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about if they've read this book, that is a very emotional one. So we're following Bryce as she is investigating this crime that happened in her city, and then 10 years later the crime starts to act up again, and she's called in by the police and like the mayor of the town to investigate this crime and figure out who's doing these murders. I just spilled onion everywhere. So at the end of the book, Bryce has figured out who done it, and she starts to try and stop that person from continuing to done it. And this person confronts her in her office, and in the process of him confronting her, kills one of the main characters. There was just something so absolutely emotional and powerful about watching this fire demon little girl fight back against man creature, stand up for her friends and what she believed in, and she kept repeating this thing over and over and over again at the end, right before she dies. And I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was basically like, I am not alone, I have my friends. It was such an impactful scene. That scene will stick with me forever and will be a very emotional and impactful scene that I think back on a lot. And I think it's really funny because the people in that scene, none of them I would say were my favorite characters by any means whatsoever. These yellow onions are definitely stronger than the other ones. I can already smell, like, I'm not tearing up, but maybe I will. Firekeeper's daughter, and I'm almost hesitant to spoil this one and tell you why I cried in this book, because it's such a good book and I want you to go into it not knowing any spoilers whatsoever. I'm gonna do it, but if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend you turn away now and just skip to the next book, because I don't think you should be spoiled for this. So Firekeeper's daughter, we are following a young girl who is about to go off to college, and at the beginning of the book, her best friend is shot and killed right in front of her. And it is a very emotional scene. I definitely was fighting back tears during that entire scene, including scenes in the future when our main character starts to realize more truths about what happened during that scene, because some of it has been repressed and she doesn't remember all of it exactly right. The scene that really did me in this book was the scene when we are following our main character, Adonis, and she goes to this dance, and it's this really happy scene, and it's like her last year in high school, and so she's found this boy she likes and she's at the dance with him, and she goes to investigate this murder because she has been asked by the FBI to investigate the murder of her best friend along with some of the other crimes that are happening in this town. And when she goes to investigate this man's room, he rapes her. And it's a very hard scene to read, and it's a very hard scene to read afterwards, how she deals with everything. I wouldn't say that I necessarily like cried hard, but there was at least tears welling up in my eyes, and I had a tear coming down my face at least once, if not twice, while reading this book. When I finish up with this, there are gonna be so many pieces of onion on the floor because I keep dropping some and I can't find them. Next up we have Empire of the Vampire. I technically cried 3 times in this book, but I'm gonna talk about one of them in specific because it's the one where I like tears were coming down my face. It wasn't just like I was like very emotional. So this is the story of Gabriel as he is telling his life story to a vampire. The sun set like 10 years ago and it has refused to rise again. And so that allowed for vampires to rise up in the world and be more powerful. So Gabriel's telling his life story in two parts to this vampire who has him captured. He's telling the story of his childhood and how he became a silver saint, and then he is telling the part of his life after he has left doing that and trying to help this woman find the Holy Grail. So the part that made me cry was the part where he was trying to find the Holy Grail. He's with this band of people who he's pretty much been annoyed with the entire time. They get attacked at this castle. These vampires finally catch up to them. Every single character except for Dior and Gabriel die a gruesome death on page. And they all die by not doing something or by like a limitation that they thought was a strength, basically. Like our main character who's a soldier, I'm getting a little choked up thinking about this right now, I'm not gonna lie. Our main character who's a soldier believed that she had this prophecy saying that she could not be killed by a man nor a monster, and so she went into battle fully prepared to not die because no one at that battle was going to kill her, and then she was killed by a monster, a vampire, a man and a monster. And then we have the bard who was so convinced that this was not the place for him to die because he needed to find his final song before he was able to leave this earth. And then we have the priest who believed that he was not going to be able to die because he believed in God and God was going to protect him against the monsters. And he dies trying to call out to God and God not listening to him. Yeah, I'm starting to get emotional just thinking about this book again. Cannot wait for book 2. It's starting to happen, guys. No tears yet, but I'm definitely holding back on them. The Sword of Kaigen, which is such a good book, and if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend the audiobook for it. The Sword of Kaigen is the story of this family who lives in this coastal town. I don't even have tissues near me. On the brink of war, and it's about the son realizing that his life's goal to become a soldier is not necessarily the only option for him. And it's also about the mom who used to be a fighter and married into this family and had to give up so many of her goals so that she could be the perfect housewife and the perfect loving mother. Find out later in the book that her family basically convinced her that she wouldn't be happy on the run fighting as a soldier because if she kept doing that, then she wouldn't be able to keep her family safe, and she wanted to have a family. She wanted to be a mom, so if she wanted her family to be safe, then she needed to marry a nice, strong man who would be able to take care of them, and she needed to stop fighting so much. And the part that made me cry, there was kind of two parts, but the first one, when the enemy attacks, the boy goes into battle and he's fighting with his dad and his uncle. It's getting hard to talk, my dudes. They go into fight and the uncle is chopped down and the dad was sent back for reasons. It's explained in the book. And so the son is like the last force against the enemy coming to kill him. And he dies completely alone and cold in the snow. He's just a child, 16, 17 years old. He's just a child and he felt the need to be this man, and he's not a man, he's a baby. There's this part where the mom realizes that he's died and she yells at the dad because he should have protected him, that they were fighting together and that no matter what his brother said, he should not have left their son, and it was the whole reason why, oh my god, I'm crying now. It was the whole reason why she married him in the first place, was so that he could protect her children, and why she gave up her entire life, and then he couldn't even protect them. Her entire life was pointless because of this man's one decision to not be there. Yeah, her life isn't completely pointless, but there's a large chunk of the book where you feel like it is. It's just such an emotional book and it's so good. It's not The Onions. I can 100% tell you this is not The Onions making me cry. And I know that it's only gonna get worse from here, and I don't remember what books are coming next, and I'm so scared end yet, and I don't want to keep crying about these books. Okay, my mascara is apparently too good because it's not running down my face, and I'm sorry about that. Okay, I've collected myself slightly. We're gonna move on to the next book. I don't know what number we're at. Next, we're gonna talk about The Deep by Nick Cutter. This is A Small Onion. I don't usually cry in horror books. Onion is rotted through, but this one was a very specific scene that I think would make a lot of people cry. So first off, we're following a pandemic. We're following a family. 2 boys basically are all that's left. One of them went down to the bottom of the ocean to research a cure for this disease. And then he went MIA, so they called in his brother to go down and talk to him and figure out what's going on. Why aren't you talking to us? Do you have a cure yet? When he gets down there, lots of things go crazy and lots of people die, and it's a great horror book. I highly recommend it if you're into body horror. The thing that made me cry in this book, there was kind of 2 scenes, let's be real. Our main character's brother experiments on animals, and so right when you get down to the bottom of the ocean, there's this Labrador, this brown lab, tail wagging, comes over and becomes best friends with our main character, and of course, as soon as I say that, you know that the dog is going to die in this book. And I sobbed so uncontrollably hard when she died. Nick Cutter wrote it really well, where I was really feeling for this dog dying. There's this other scene later on in the book where you find out about the brother's childhood a little bit more. You learn that their mother raped him repeatedly, and that because of that, he murders her. And there was just kind of this satisfaction cry that I had at that point in the book where I was like, good, I'm glad you killed her. I'm glad you did that, because she was already looking at your brother and she wasn't going to stop with just you 2. And it wasn't like the brother did it so that he could protect his brother. He literally murdered his mom to get vengeance on her because he is a psychopath. He doesn't necessarily care about how his brother's doing. Apparently I needed to swap Sword of Kaigen and The Deep, because Sword of Kaigen made me cry way harder just talking about it with you all than The Deep did. But I sobbed uncontrollably when I read The Deep, and you can actually watch me cry on camera. Editing Manda, I want to interrupt really quickly here. So the scene where the dog dies in The Deep, one of the things that was super emotional for me, and I forgot to mention in this video, is that our main character is a veterinarian. So when he watches this dog die, he remembers back to having to put down other animals, and he had to watch the life leave their eyes, and he had to kill them. Next up, we have The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. And I did not cry on camera for this book because I was quite literally sitting on the couch right over there, sobbing my eyes out. I think I cried for about 30 minutes straight while reading this book. So The Good Daughter is the story of these 2 girls who, when they are very young, this man shows up at their house and walks them into the woods and says that he is going to kill them. So the part that made me cry is you think you know everything that happened at the very beginning of the book. There's this part that says like what happened to Sam, and then there's this part that says what happened to Charlie. Eventually you get to the part where there's like an interlude and it says what really happened to, I think it's Sam. I can't remember which sister it is right now, but there's this part of where you find out what really happened to the sister. And so this entire book leads you into this idea that one of the sisters gets buried alive and is killed. She's not really killed, but the book makes you think that she is killed. And it makes you think that the first sister, who wasn't buried alive, ran off into the woods and ran up to a neighbor's house. And instead of asking for help and getting help, asked for a bowl of ice cream so that she could sit down and just have a treat. And so it makes you think that she's not a good sister. The book later allows you to realize in the what actually happened to, I think it's Sam, what actually happened to Sam chapter, she was hunted in the woods by this man, and this girl was like 8 years old, and that he raped her repeatedly with objects, with his body, with a knife. And when she finally got to her neighbor's house, she asked for a bowl of ice cream because she is lactose intolerant, and that she thought that if she had this bowl of ice cream that it would kill her, and that she thought her sister was already dead, and that if she had the ice cream she would die too, and she wouldn't have to live with what this man did to her. And she kept feeling like he was inside of her. She just couldn't escape it. And it was just really hard to read. And then when her dad finally showed up, instead of being supportive and caring for her, and let's be real, like he's going through a lot too, he basically told her that she needs to hide what happened to her, and she can't tell anyone because they're not gonna understand. And she's just so young, and it was just really, really emotional and hard to read. And you find out later that she is the good daughter and that she was doing her best and that she was doing all of this for her dad, that she was being such a good daughter. She had all these issues in her life from trying to hide this fact about herself, but she loved her father so much that she didn't want to disappoint him. I can't. I don't really have anything else to say about this book, so I'm just gonna cry for a minute and then we'll move on, okay? I can 100% promise you that I am crying. Here's mascara on the tissue. I don't know if you can see that super well. And I can 100% promise you it's not the onions. These onions are doing nothing. Don't understand why I don't cry when chopping onions. Taking a moment to compose myself. We're gonna move on because I think I only have one book left. Honestly, these onions are doing nothing, so I'm gonna chop the last half that I have here and then we're gonna stop bothering with them. And that next book is The Fate of the Tearling. I mentioned a few times on my channel that this book made me cry the hardest that a book has ever in my life made me cry, and that still is true. And I think it would be really hard for a book to outdo this one at this point, and I do think that it is something kind of specific to me. You'll understand why I'm at least emotional about it, even if you don't cry. The Fate of the Tearling is the third book in the Tearling series. It is the finale, and it is a sci fantasy story about this girl named Kelsey who was raised away from the palace. When she turns 19, she's brought back to this realm. Hard for her to return to it because her uncle was supposed to rule in her stead, and the realm has been kind of destroyed, and she has to do all of this work to bring it back to glory and get away from the Red Queen, who is trying to stop her and trying to take control of everything. So we follow Kelsey and a band of a few different characters throughout the 3 books. And the thing that made me cry in this book was the ending of the book. And a lot of people online who have read this series don't like the ending of the 3rd book. They think it's bad. I personally think it was one of the best endings I have read in a really, really, really long time. And as I'm about to explain to you, made me super emotional. I'm gonna warn you one more time right here that I'm about to spoil the ending of a trilogy. Kelsey fights really hard to keep the Red Queen from taking over. We're watching all these characters grow and learn. She finds a way to stop the Red Queen. The way that she does it is through magic, and the way that she's able to undo everything is that she changes the entire timeline. And when she changes the timeline, it makes it so that they're no longer in this medieval setting. They're no longer fighting for their lives. They're no longer people who know each other. They're in a modern day setting, and all of her friends don't know who she is anymore. And all these people that she sacrificed everything for don't know that she's even done anything, because the entire timeline has changed, and all of these skills that she had to be this queen are pointless and useless in this world. And so for her to bring good to everyone meant that she couldn't have the life that she wanted, and she has to just be an ordinary person now, because she went from being this magical queen who is defending her realm to being this teenage girl who works in a bookshop or something. She goes and finds all the people who used to be in her life, and they're so much happier now, and she can't even be friends with any of them anymore. She has no purpose in life, and she can remember how great her life used to be, and she can't get back to it, and she doesn't want to because everyone else is so much happier now except for her. She's just going to be miserable the rest of her life, and she's gonna know forever that there was magic in the world, and that it was fantastic, and that she was a badass, and that she could do these amazing things, and she's no longer going to be able to do them. She gave up everything, and no one knows about it. And it kind of feels like if you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia after they've been kings and queens in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for years, and they've lived a certain lifestyle, they've lived with magic, and they've seen how great life can be, and then they accidentally walk back through the wardrobe as adults and have to return to their teenage lives in London during World War II, and it's awful. That would be the worst thing possible, to have to come back after, to have to live this kind of a life after seeing all the grandness and everything beautiful that could be out there, and knowing that you can't even undo it because everyone is so much happier without you. I'm just gonna cry for a few minutes, okay? And then we'll finish up this video. I need a tissue. So those are all the books that made me cry in 2021. I don't normally cry while reading or watching TV or anything like that. I'm usually very calm and collected and cool. I don't know what happened this year. This is the first year that I have like sobbed in a book, and I have like more than just like shed one tear in a book. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this video again because I can't promise you that I'll ever cry in another book again. But this has been fun because even though I'm crying right now and rubbing mascara off of my face, I genuinely had a good time, and I'm glad that I actually cried for you all in this video because I was a little worried that I was gonna be an unemotional little ball of shit. Let me know down below if you have any books that have made you cry because I might check them out and try and read them. Hope that you all had a great time. I appreciate each and every one of you who is watching my videos, subscribing to my channel, liking my content. Your participation really means so much to me. I have a bunch of onions to go eat now. I'm not gonna eat them like this. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye.